Um, okay, so we are holding in the Maimer in the middle of Ice Bays on page Tess, and we were talking about the different levels of eating or divrei reshus in general, whether it's food, whether it's living quarters, whether it's other physical activities, a home, etc., that there are two approaches. There is tzaddik oichel l'soiva nafshay. There's a tzaddik that eats for the satiation of his soul, and there's the opposite. By the Rasha, it's bet and rishoyim techsar, that by the Rasha he's eating for his stomach's sake. It has no spiritual component, whereas the tzaddik, his eating and his consumption is about a spiritual elevation. And not only that, but the Rebbe went on and said that the eating of a yid, since a yid's body and soul are interconnected with each other, therefore, what happens is whatever happens in the soul and the deficiency in the soul affects also the body as well. So the fact that by a Rasha we say bet and rishoyim techsar, that the stomach of a Rasha, the fact that he's filling his stomach, makes it a deficiency and something that's lacking. So this also affects the physical body as well. Let's see again, top of page Tess, the 5th page of the copies, that we can see to what degree eating in a negative fashion, even kosher food, but eating it in a negative fashion can impact the physical well-being of the body. So he says the second line on page Tess, to such a degree, if the way how he's eating is that he is, chugging down wine, he's like acting as a glutton with meat and so on, this affects by him the opposite of life, like it's explicit in the Torah. What he's referring to is the Ben Soder of Moira, the rebellious son, that based on how much he eats and so on, that is something that it contributes to his being judged as a rebellious son, and therefore he is liable for a death penalty in a certain situation. But what we see over here is the idea that the person is eating even kosher food can impact the physical existence of his body. It's not just a soul impact, but it's also a spiritual impact. It's a physical impact as well. So he's saying, this means, though the idea of eating its purpose is just the opposite. It's not to impact the body negatively, but it's about bringing the soul and body together. It's about having the soul and the body in such a type of way that there shouldn't be a separation between them. So, despite that, what happens over here is that Shemakol Makim, still in all line 6, when he's eating to fill the desires of his soul, until he becomes a level of zoil v'soiva, as he says, this affects by the person the opposite of life, instead of contributing to his life, which is the purpose of food, to join the soul and the body. And in a similar vein, the idea of a person's eating is not just an attitude type of thing, or the level of the person, like we said, that tzaddik is oichel soiva nafshay, the Rasha is eating in a negative way, but it also has to do with the time. When is he eating? Bein Shabbos l'chol, like the general difference between Shabbos and the weekday. Shabbos sarach lechel basar shamin v'yayin yoshin davkid. On Shabbos, a person has to eat specifically fatty meat and old wine specifically. The afal pishiyesh ba'achila hanos haguf. Though in eating there is a delight of the body, so one would think, what am I doing on Shabbos? Enjoying my bodily needs. Hadrei zeh. Still in all, but atzma mitzvah. On Shabbos, it's in such a way that the very eating itself is considered a mitzvah. As opposed to the 6 days a week, etc. It's not an idea of a mitzvah. But when it comes to the 6 days of the week, here is where we get to the difference between the Talmud Chacham and the Amaretz. Al shebezeh gufi yesh chiluk bin Talmud Chacham dikri Shabbos. In this itself, when it comes to the rest of the week, there's a difference here in Talmud Chacham that we know Talmud Chacham is Shabbos. So since the Talmud Chacham is called Shabbos, so by him it's Shabbos even in the middle of the week. Therefore his eating even during the weekday, the tzaddik is eating to satisfy his soul, that his food is and his eating is only a soul event. Just like on Shabbos, even for an ordinary person, eating is a mitzvah, it's a soul event. The same thing by this person when it comes to eating on Shabbos, by a tzaddik and the Talmud Chacham, when it comes to eating in the middle of the week, since he is a Shabbos-dik person, so therefore even in the middle of the week it's like Shabbos. Masha Enkein Ha'aretz, as opposed to Ha'aretz, it says Asur lechel basar. An ignoramus, someone that's a man of the earth, someone that's involved in earthiness, so he's prohibited from eating meat. The reason for this is in addition to the inner Kabbalistic reason that's brought down to the Torah, but the simple reason is the since he could be satisfied, it's enough for him to eat bread with something to accompany the bread. So the only purpose that he has in eating the meat is only to fill the desires of his body, and therefore, because it's only to fill the desires of his body, it is something that's considered a negative. And therefore, the Amaretz, in the middle of the week, we tell them, Asur lechel basar, it's prohibited for him to eat meat. Top of page Yud calls a move on from all of the above that we just now explained. It's understood. Shekol misheina bedargas tzaddik, anyone that's not on the level of a tzaddik, in bedargas beini, rather he's on the level of a beinani. Balachas kama v'kama misheina afil bedargas beini. How much more so? Someone that's not even on the level of a beini, meaning even lower than a beini. The Rebbe doesn't want to use the term explicitly. He needs to evaluate himself. He needs to be honest with himself. Both according to the characteristic of his soul. In other words, he needs to know himself. Am I sitting down to eat over here for my own sake of enjoyment and pleasure? And also according to the characteristic of the food that he's eating. Of course, it's different if he's eating staples, bread, proteins, vegetables, etc., or he's eating something that's a very enjoyable type of food. So he has to evaluate and decide in what manner can he cause a drawing down of holiness into the food. If he's doing it in such a way that he's going to be able to elevate it. In other words, that he knows that if he eats this food, he will bring it up higher. Or just the opposite, that the involvement in the food will affect in the person, in the food itself, a descent. And therefore he'd better keep away from it. Katzivui, like the command in the Torah, Kadosh Atzcha b'mutar, you should sanctify yourself in what's permitted. That's the Chazal explain, is the meaning of the pasuk, Kedoshim Tihiyu. Kedisa b'Tanya, like it's brought down Tanya, Shuhu Midairaisa, the mitzvah of sanctifying oneself in what's permitted, in holding oneself back from taivas, is something that's a Torah obligation. It's a mitzvah essa. Like it says, Kedoshim Tiyu, it says you shall be holy, Viskadishtem, you shall make yourselves holy. What is that referring to? That, like the Rambam explains, what is the meaning of the pasuk when it says Kedoshim Tiyu? Shepirushai Pirushim Tiyu. You should be separating yourselves, removing yourselves. Why is it necessary to remove yourself? The idea of separating oneself from mundane things is to negate that he shouldn't be someone disgusting by the permission of the Torah. Meaning, the Ramban explains that since there are so many things that the Torah permitted us to do, whether it's in pleasures having to do with intimacy, or pleasures having to do with food, or any other type of pleasures. So one might think that a person can indulge in kosher food and kosher activities as long as they're permitted, to the degree where he becomes a glutton and hedonistic and so on. That's called a naval b'rishus haTorah. He's being disgusting by the permission of the Torah. So the Ramban says, that's why the Torah says, Kedoshim Tihiyu. On top of everything else that I told you, that you are prohibited from doing, so even the things that you are permitted to do, make sure that you are Kedoshim, that you're sanctified, that you're holy, that you're Kadosh is also from the word Kadosh, removed, all separated, removed from physical pursuits when it's done just for the enjoyment of the palate and the body and so on. And now we come back to understanding V'zeu Klolos Inyan HaNedarim. That's the general idea of vows. And we see this association of vows with the idea of Kedoshim Tiyu. She'enei rak inyan haprishus. It's not just that a vow is the idea of separation, but rather, like the Chazal say, Nedarim siyog leprishus. Nedarim is a fence for the precious, for separating oneself from overindulging in the physical world. Eluhu siyog kimageder me'avonim leprishus. It's like a fence, or like a fence made out of stone, for the idea of precious, for being separated and removed from the physical world. So this is how we are answering the initial question that we had in the beginning of the Maimer. On the one hand, the Yerushalmi says that a person will have to give an accounting for everything that he saw and he didn't eat. On the other hand, we have the mitzvah of Nedarim. So which is it? Are we supposed to engage with the physical world or not? So the Rebbe says it depends. It depends on a person has to evaluate himself, what type of item it is. It depends on where he is at spiritually. Is he in a level of a Talmud Chacham or not? Is he in a level of a tzaddik or not? Is it during the weekday or is it during Shabbos? All these things contribute to evaluating if he should be engaging with the physical or not. And that is what Nedarim symbolizes, this idea of separating oneself and removing oneself from overindulging in the physical, in just the opposite, and manifesting the mitzvah sesam and atoida of Kaddish Atzmcha b'mutarlach.
Recording progress.
Ois Gimel, page Yud. V'hinei k'dei leida. Im tzarich lifrish ma'adavar oila loise l'kedusha. We said that a person needs to evaluate himself. That's what he said at the beginning of this page. So for a person to know if he comes across a certain item and he needs to decide, is this something that I should engage with, or is it something that I should remove myself from it? Or can I elevate it to holiness? Which thing he could refine and elevate, and what thing he needs to separate himself from. So a person could think, I'll evaluate it on my own. I'll figure it out on my own. So we say that doesn't work. Since a person is close to oneself, meaning a person is by nature not objective, he's subjective, and therefore his decisions are colored by his own self-interest and his own ego. And all sins love covers over. So therefore, if you love someone, you will overlook anything negative that they do. There's no greater love than self-love. So therefore, since there's no greater love than self-love, so since I love myself, so a person cannot rely on himself and trust himself that he will have an appropriate and correct evaluation. Am I on a level that I could elevate this item of the physical world or not? So he says, top page Yud Aleph, Ki Alpha Pishaloi mit Kitzur Shulchan Aruch v'Shulchan Aruch, though he studies the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch or even studies the big Shulchan Aruch, Harei hu meshuchat, still in all, he is bribed by his own self-love. He has no objectivity. V'yachol litos ba'atzmai, he could make a mistake about himself. And he could think, though he will engage and be involved in matters of this world, he will believe that still in all he will be able to withstand the test. He will not come to a state and situation that he said before, that Yeshurun became fat, he enjoyed his life, and the result of that was Vayivat, and he rebelled and he kicked. So I cannot be a proper judge of myself because there is too much subjectivity for me to make an objective decision. For this reason, I have to go to a chacham, yachad mumche, an expert yachid individual. He releases the vow. He is the one that informs me. Should I be making the vow or not? Should we keep to this vow or not? That is why, as we said at the beginning of the Maimer, these halachas were related to the heads of the Shvatim to teach us that a Yachid Mumchen, an individual who's an expert, can release from the vow. So now the question is, what is it so special about the Chacham? So he says in line 8, page Yud Aleph, the idea behind this is, it says in the Pasuk, HaChacham Einov Beroisha. The wise person, his eyes are in his head. So what does it mean his eyes are in his head? That means he sees what the future will bring. Because the wise person, his eyes are in his head, for that reason, the sages are called the eyes of the congregation. They see what is the will of Hashem. And they lead the person on the good and straight path. It's just like in the physical, that the eye that's in the head sees the road that you need to go on. And the eyes make sure that he shouldn't trip and fall. A person needs to follow, their legs need to follow the directions that the eye and the head determines that he has to walk in. As opposed to the feet. Though they are actually doing the walking, they are actually leading the person. Still in all, the feet cannot decide where to go. Rather, the decision comes about through the eyes that are in the head. In a person's soul, what part is called the eyes, which is the chacham, the level of chachma in the person? Like it's explained in Tanya, what the Chazal say, who is someone that's a chacham? The one that sees what will come about, what will be born. So the simple meaning of the Chazal means he sees what will be the outcome. He sees the results. Someone that's not wise sees something in front of him and makes a decision just based on what he sees in front of him. Someone that's wise calculates the outcome and the results and what will happen down the line. That's the simple meaning of the Maimer Chazal. Comes the Alter Rebbe in Tanya and says, Haroyes HaNoilad means something deeper. Line 20, Sheroye kol davar eich noilad v'nisave me'ayin leyesh b'dvaravayev ruch pivis barach. That the Chacham sees, in other words, he analyzes, he looks in, he's aware of everything, how it's born and came into being from nothing to something by the spoken word of Hashem and the breath of his mouth. That it brings into being and it gives life and brings into existence everything from ayin to yesh. This is just like a person sees concerning themselves. That he sees concerning himself, that every morning he's born anew. And he say, I thank you, Hashem, the living, existing God, that you return to me my neshamas. I'm being reborn every morning. Neshama shenasata, the neshama that you placed in me. Again, we're referring to this every morning. Through meditating in this at the beginning of the day, so then this assures, this meditation at the beginning of the day, realizing that he's born anew every day, it ensures and creates that the way he acts throughout the day should be appropriate to the will of the living, existing God. Noisna Torah mitzvah, the one that gives the Torah and commands the mitzvah. Ubalabai is top of page Yud Gim Beis, and the one that rules and controls the entire world. This idea that we need to use the Chacham to be able to determine whether I need to keep a neder or not, whether I need to separate myself from this physical item or not. So that's why it says in the beginning of the parsha, Vidaber Moshe Roshei Amatos, and Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes, Lebnei Yisrael, to the Yidden, Shekol Echad MiYisrael Tzarech Lekasher Atzmoi B'Torah. Every single Yid needs to bind himself and connect himself in Torah. And how is that done? Through binding himself and connecting himself to the heads of the Yid, the heads of the tribes. Man Malka Rabbanan, who are considered the kings, that's the Chachamim. Through this involvement and binding himself with Hashem, with the Torah and with the Chachamim, so then he has the empowerment to be able to deal with matters of this world. So it's not just, as we said before, that they will determine for him what matters of this world he should be engaged with and what permitted matters of the world he should disengage from, but also the power of Torah and the connection with the tzaddikim enables him that when he is engaged with the world, he shouldn't become pulled down by it and lowered through it. Ois Daled, line 8. Yet, after he brings his request and he's seeking out guidance by the heads of the tribes. The goal is not to be the whole time tethered, that he cannot make a step without seeking direction the whole time, but rather that he should graduate to be able to do on his own the avoid of Torah study and the avoid of fulfillment of mitzvahs. This is why he continues in the pasuk after talking about Vidaber al Roshei Amatos. What does it say? Eila hachukim gomer. These are the laws and statutes bein ish leishtoi bein av lebitoi, between a man and his wife and a father and his daughter, concerning over there the rules of releasing from vows. The idea of a wife is, Chazal say, what is considered a kosher woman? A woman that fulfills the will of her husband. Hainu, in the case of the Jewish people, our husband is Hashem, and we are an Isha to Hashem, we are his wife. Hainu shu kli muchan laser tzarina kadosh baruch hu. We are a wife, meaning we are a ready vessel to fulfill the will of Hashem. Binyan Mishal Basu, an idea of a daughter is Kimavur b'Medrash, like it's explained in Medrash, Shekishiktana v'yichoita alaviseha, when a daughter is young and she sins against her parents, Ein aviseha misramin Allah. Her parents do not become upset against her. Ela adrab, machzirim oisalamutav. Instead, they redirect her. They show their young daughter what is the appropriate path to take. Shetisnaig ba'ofen hamasim lebitur shalaav. She should act in a manner that's appropriate for the daughter of the father. And the idea behind this in the avoid of Hashem. Sha'ascholi hi b'chinas bas. The beginning is the level of being a daughter. Then we come to an even higher level of a kosher woman, that we do the will of the husband. So there's these different levels that a person needs to train himself to. First, he needs to be directed from above, like a daughter that needs to be directed from the parents. But the next step is that past that, there is, I am a kosher woman. I am doing the will of Hashem. I do not need this constant direction. Line 23. Through this we arrive at what it says later on in the parsha. Avenge the revenge of the Yidden from the Midian. Chassidus explains that Midian is the word arguments and dispute. Not only are there two domains, like it says that when Hashem said that Nasa Adam, Nasa Lashon Rabim, we will make man. He said it in the plural, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, why do you write this? People are going to see that there's going to think that there are two domains. There's Hashem and someone else. There are two rulers. There's two people in control. So Hashem told him, you should write the way I'm telling you. We will make man. And whoever wants to make a mistake should make a mistake. That is not even yet the stage of modern Meriva. Modern Meriva, argument and dispute, is even worse than just having two domains, two controls, two rulers. Rather, they are totally separate things in a way of argument, that the other domain, the other issues is arguing. And when one power and nation is powerful, the other one is weak at his expense. the inyan zeh, and this type of modern meriva, the dispute, the argument of klippa against kedusha, we prevent it and negate it by having first the vows, because that makes like the fence, so there shouldn't even be able to be this attack from klippa. Top of the last page, Yud Gimel, by days of Boim L'Knisel Eretz Yisrael. Through this we come to entering Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Tov V'Rechava, a good and broad land. Eretz Asher Goymer Ein Hashem Elokecha Ba Mereish Lashon V'Adach Lashon, a land that Hashem eyes is in it from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. Koil Gam Shekol Echad Yisrael Poil Ba'arba Moisav, including also that every single Yid affects in this 4 cubits of B'chol Oilam Kulei in the entire world. Hamaim the Matzav, the Eretz Tov V'Rechava, a state and situation where he expands Eretz Yisrael over the entire world that should be good and broad, like it says that when Mashiach comes, Eretz Yisrael will expand over the entire world. Lastly, is Baruch Dira B'Tachtonim, to make a home for the Eibishter down here below. By days of Boim L'Kiyum Ayud, and through this we come to fulfillment of the promise Hasid Eretz Yisrael Tishpash Kol Olam Kulei, that by a Yid spreading Eretz Yisrael out in the spiritual sense, so we make that it will come about the time of Mashiach, when Eretz Yisrael will actually expand in the entire world. The Bias Mashiach Tzkeinu B'Korav Mamash, and the coming of Mashiach Tzkeinu soon Mamash.
Record.